Hi, I'm Bill Murphy, author of Thriving in the Storm, but I started out in the mortgage origination space. I've been lucky enough to surround myself with some incredible people that have mentored me and achieved some pretty high producing status throughout the country. It started here. Childhood was pretty rough growing up. Always made to feel less than, nothing was ever good enough. There was a lot of pointed in the chest, shamed and ridiculed. It was really hard because when I thought I gave it my all, it was still falling short, and there was still consequences to pay. The shaming, the ridicule, the beatdowns. So I never thought I had it that bad. I just thought it was normal. But I always felt down about myself. I never felt good enough. So it wasn't until that 2019 when I was actually training for that Ironman, I was listening to a book, I Don't Want to Talk About It, written by Terrence Real, who was a counselor, and it was about men's depression. Terry wrote it about himself and his family, and his dad used to beat him down, ridicule, shame him, and I went and sought out Terry. And he's looking at my intake paperwork, head down, glasses on the bridge of his nose, and I'm telling him the story how his dad was my dad, I was him, but I had it way worse than he had it. He took off his glasses, looked at me, and said, "You're fucked unless you get help, and you need to go down to PCS, Psychological Counseling Services in Arizona." And so I went kicking and screaming because I knew I wanted to make a difference and save my family and be better with my kids. And one of the things that happened when I was down there is you had to create a trauma egg. And so I didn't really remember many things before the age of 5, and I called my mom, I called my sister, and I asked them some questions, and I reported some of that stuff to the clinicians. And they said, in order for him to stop crying as a toddler, he was put under water so he wouldn't cry anymore. And so I'm watching them cry, and I'm listening to them talk, and I was like, wait a second, this is not okay. And then, the stories of getting put through a wall at 8 or 9 years old, and then having to patch that wall up because I was made to patch it up because it was my fault that the wall broke, that I was put through as a kid. And now I'm listening to these clinicians cry and tell these stories, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's me. And so where I was lacking is never had self-compassion, never had self-love, didn't feel like that was a big deal until I heard them talk about it. And if you told me the story about your son, your neighbor, your grandkid, your nephew, that he went through that, I would be choked up and emotional about it because I would feel empathy. I didn't feel empathy for myself. So that was the one thing that I had to work on. And I realized that I had depression. Now there was a test that I took. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experience. It's called the ACE test. And this test, the therapist gave to me, and he said, statistically, you should be dead or in jail with what you scored. Most people with your score, with your adverse childhood experiences, are either addicted to drugs, alcohol, crime, violence, gang activity, pornography, obsessive compulsive eating, gambling, you name it. So I think the stigma out there and the stereotype out there, and it's getting better, but men's depression is a real thing. But here's the problem. Men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. And why is that? Because women tend to talk about it and express their feelings appropriately, where men don't. And they keep it bottled up, and that's what I did. I kept it bottled up for 48 years and never told a soul. Would not admit depression. You know what I said? Angst and anxiety. I'm an intense, anxious person, and I get anxiety occasionally. And it wasn't until I really did some self-discovery that I was able to understand where I was. And when I left PCS, they diagnosed me with PTSD. And you know what I said? Because of my childhood. I said, I'm not worthy of that. That's a soldier's diagnosis. That's somebody that was on the battlefield that has that diagnosis. I couldn't even be worthy of my own damn diagnosis with PTSD because I didn't think I was good enough to have it. And so I had a lot more work to do, and have continued to work on it. If you can let that go and not root for karma, good things can happen for you. But when you hold on to that anger towards somebody else, it can really bring you down. So forgive, make peace with your past, make peace with yourself. Self-compassion and self-love is really, I think, in a man's world, overlooked. And I continue to work on myself, and that's why I have these incredible routines where I am working on myself every single day. Now I was working and I wasn't going through these junk miles, and I think so many of us go through these junk miles every single day where we're not productive, we're not creating, we're not doing much. And then you get to the thriving mindset. And so now you start putting these drills in. You're stretching the stress muscle. You're getting better. You're building. You're growing. It's just like being in the gym. If you just go through the motions and you're not really putting intentionality into anything or focus or being deliberate, you're not going to gain anything. It's when you increase that heart rate, when you put your mind where your focus is, where you start to see the growth. And so in the thriving mindset that's where you're able to create. We talked about the victim mindset. In the victim mindset, you're held down. You're held down by anger, sadness, depression, despair. You're down and out. And where you need to be is the thriving mindset. And so where you can create is now you have joy, love, peace, happiness, zest, enthusiasm, and you're on top of the world. And that's where you can start to create. Every day is not going to be perfect. So that's when you really need to be focused and disciplined, is when it's the tough days and getting through it, because that's where the growth happens.